One of the greatest entrepreneur story I want to talk about actually started on the streets in India before it grew all the way and hit the global stage on Google's digital platform. So the gentleman I'm talking about, his name is Gulshan Kumar. In 1982, he sold mango juice on the streets of New Delhi in the hot summer months. And as an entrepreneur, he found there's an opportunity to fill a gap that is unfulfilled, much like entrepreneurs around the world find. And that gap was, he realized that around the neighborhood he lived, people were listening to devotional music, and often they were older, so their eyesight was fading, so they couldn't read the Sanskrit or Hindi text. So he started making bootleg cassette tapes to fill that gap. And so these were cassette tapes of, say, Hari Om Sharan singing the Hanuman Chalisa or Anup Jalota singing Meera Bhajans. And he grew the business of these bootleg cassette tapes, expanded into other categories, including Bollywood music, and then eventually went to film production. And the company grew to an extent where it became the third biggest movie production company in India. Unfortunately, he met with a very tragic end, which we won't go into, but his son and brother took over the business. And as the music business expanded, they realized that these days people listen to that kind of music, especially pop, rock, film music, on digital platforms. So they started putting it up on digital platform. And that company is now, you'd all recognize, is TiE Series. Okay, started by this mango juice seller on the streets of Mumbai. So they started using YouTube as a platform. And what Gulshan Kumar's entrepreneurial effort has done is grown to such an extent. I want to draw your attention to one number. If you look at the stats, it says this channel has 84 billion views. It's become the number one, the biggest channel on YouTube, competing with Disney and Sony and TED and every other media company that is out there. That is phenomenal for this entrepreneur. There are three things startling about that number that I put up. This is the number of views of videos on Gulshan Kumar's TiE Series channel. The first, what does 84 billion mean in human terms? It means every human being on the planet, including babies, including people who've never laid their hands on a computer or phone, have on average watched 11 to 12 videos just on the TiE Series channel. Think about that for a minute. Second, this is not just an Indian phenomenon, what this man has created. This is a global phenomenon. 40% of the views actually come from outside India. And this site operates not just in English or Hindi, but also in Spanish and Portuguese. Third, this entire operation that has driven to 84 billion views, just think for a minute how many people the company must be employing. And the answer is 12. Just 12 for managing the YouTube channel. So he's been very resource smart by leveraging a resource base, a digital platform, an open platform called YouTube. He's grown it, and now it's become the number one channel on YouTube. That is pretty phenomenal. And it shows what is possible when it comes to entrepreneurship. But that's not what MSA Kumar asked me to speak about. He wanted me to speak about not entrepreneurship, but how to be a happy human, especially if you are a hardworking, hard-charging entrepreneur. So how do you do that? I do know one thing that makes people happy is music and dance. Music and dance. And given that we just talked about Bollywood, I thought, why not we put this together and try a small social experiment. Since we have a room full of entrepreneurs, you're all good at taking risks, you're super confident, and you're willing to step outside your comfort zone. So quick show of hands, how many of you here like Bollywood dancing? Raise your hands, don't be afraid. Okay, keep your hands raised, and those of you who haven't raised their hand, just look at the person, courageous person who raised a hand, okay? Keep an eye on them. Now the people who raised their hand, please stand up. So we're going to make them do Bollywood dancing right here on stage, first thing up lunch. If somebody raised their hand and they didn't sit down, they didn't stand up, please make sure that they are standing up, right? You can't just raise your hand, call yourself an entrepreneur, and then start shrink back. In fact, if you will, feel free to join me here on stage. because this will be our best opportunity to dance in front of so many people. How courageous can that be? Good. See, at least a dozen people are walking up, or you can be in the front. Now, we can't just let them do it and have the fun. We actually want the whole room to do it. So everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. We're going to set a record for the largest dance performance, flash mob, Bollywood dance at a TiE conference. How many? 400 people doing it together. Okay? So the people who are standing up are the true risk takers, the entrepreneurs. You don't want to be the person sitting down and shying out. Everybody stand up, 100% participation. We're setting a record. Now, I'll teach you how to do it. It's simple. It's just got 4 moves. The 4 moves go this way. Okay? Step 1 is you put your hand. Imagine it's a Sunday. You want to do something useful, and you screw some light bulbs on. 1, 2, 3, 4 with a hip shake. And then the other way. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we repeat it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's step 1. Step 2, you want to do something very useful, so you're doing some spring cleaning. You grab things that you don't need. 1, 2, and toss it. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Other side. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, we're all sweaty, so you want to towel yourselves up. So gather a towel and go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we repeat that. Okay, that's step 3. Last step. You've been very good at this, so you want to do a victory dance because your spouse is like, amazing, you did a great job this weekend. So you go step forward and say, and you do the victory dance like athletes do. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Got that? It's simple. Now let's put it all together to music. And if you're following me, you got to mirror me. So when I go to the right, you go to your left. Okay? And you can just follow what I do. All right. Anish, can we have some really rocking Bollywood music? Here we go. Light bulbs. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 4. Start toweling. 1, 2, 3, 4. Celebrate now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Last round.
अरे अभी तो पार्टी शुरू हुई है.
Little more energy. Amazing, great job, people.
अरे अभी तो पार्टी शुरू हुई है.
You want to keep going? Okay.
बाद में ना कहना कुछ भी पहले ही दे दूं warning.
This group doesn't even want to stop. We'll have more of it tonight. But thank you very much for being such good sports. But I do want to return back to what I was asked to speak about, the happy human. But leading up to the release of Happy Human, something happened on October 4th, 2018. That makes me think, am I even qualified to talk about this topic? So October 4th, 2018 was going to be one of my biggest days as an author and speaker. This book had just been released, and at 4 p.m., I was going to be interviewed on TV on the local affiliate, the San Francisco affiliate of a national channel, ABC 7. Instead, at 4 p.m., I choose to do something completely different. I was not in the TV studio. I was on a stretcher in the emergency room of Stanford University Hospital with an IV down my arm, rapidly losing consciousness. The soon-to-be famous author had become infamous, and the happy human had devolved to be unhappy human. You must be thinking, Gopi, what happened? Well, I said I choose to be in the emergency room instead of the TV studio. And I'm exaggerating because no one makes those choices. But leading up to that day, over 12 weeks, I had made a set of lifestyle choices that had led to a complete breakdown in my system and landed me in the emergency room. And entrepreneurs in this room should recognize what I'm going to say next, because this is all too common a situation amongst us. So over a 12-week period, I had to tend to my job at Google, which is demanding in and of itself. But on top of it, I traveled to 7 cities in 4 countries, doing some intense things along the way. Intense things like traveling all the way to India, to Thrissur, for the first anniversary Shradam of my father's passing. And then going back to the US 2 weeks later to compete in the World Championship of Public Speaking in Chicago, producing a music festival at Esalen, launching a book, and if all of that was not enough, participating very actively in the Burning Man Festival, which by itself can destroy you. But fueled by ambition and passion and this notion that more is better and you got to achieve and get to the next thing, and this is what will lead to happiness, I just kept pushing myself. And along the way, I ignored the basic laws of self-care. And nature is very unforgiving when it comes to this. And the laws of nature are immutable, even if inconvenient. Because at one point, my system completely shut down, and it started manifesting in a certain symptom where I couldn't even speak. I couldn't deliver a single speech, and I had to cancel 16 upcoming speaking engagements for the book and instead be in the emergency room. And what helped me recover from all of that was a piece of advice that I talk about in the book, but I'd ignored myself. And there was a piece of advice my health coach at the South Asian Heart Center would tell me at the end of each call. She would say, Gopi, take your meds every day. Take your meds every day. And you might be wondering, what sort of medication was she talking about? What sort of amazing miracle bottle does it come in? But the medication that Sunitha, my health coach, was talking about was not something that you would buy in a pharmacy. The meds that she was talking about was simply a 4-step daily process of taking care of this system. M for meditation, E for exercise, D for diet, and S for sleep. Extremely simple, nothing new here, but simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Now, this might seem intimidating, especially as an entrepreneur, the kind of hours you put in. It's both like, I don't know what to do, and I don't have the time to do what to do. But let me demystify it for you. Each of this, there is fairly complex and sophisticated and advanced things you can talk about. But you can start with an elegant level of simplicity. So on the one hand, meditation, and this part of the world, and Kerala in particular, there are many, many modalities you can go study, learn, and practice. You can run off to a Vipassana center and be in silence for 10 days, meditating 14 hours a day, if that is what you choose. But you don't have to go to that extreme. All I'm talking about, all she's talking about, is a few minutes of spaciousness in your life, some sort of a contemplative life, contemplative time, a few minutes every day where you can take a step back from your frenzy of what you're doing and just kind of observe and check in with your body, mind. Similarly, when it comes to exercise, there are many things you can do. My own personal choice, developed over the years, is twice a week I do yoga, twice a week I do high-intensity interval training, and over the weekend I do aerobic workout, biking or swimming. But it doesn't have to be on many days when I don't have time for any of those. Basic functional walking is enough, because the body likes movement. Figure out what is the easiest and best way for you to move the body on a daily basis within the parameters of where you live. And it simply could mean put on your shoes, go out of the door, walk for 10, 15, 20 minutes, come back home. Similarly, diet, there is a whole bunch of methods and expert advice on this topic, and it can very quickly overwhelm us. But I say just start with some simple rules. My 4 simple rules I tell people that I try to follow under this diet formula is: first, eat things that grow on plants, not made in plants, meaning it came straight off a tree, shrub, or bush, not from a factory. The second, as close to its natural state as possible, because nature is extremely intelligent in figuring out what nourishes us best. Third, the less human touch between the plant and your mouth, the better, meaning the less processing, the healthier it is for you. And 4, cut back on sugar and carbs as much as possible. I know it's hard to do in the diet, and it wasn't quite happening at the lunch, but at least be conscious of it. And finally, I say make water your beverage of choice as opposed to anything that comes from a colored bottle or can. So simple rules. It all stemming from be conscious about what you put into your body because it has a huge implication on how you show up as an entrepreneur, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And the fourth one is sleep, a simple but highly powerful way by which you restore. And how much are we talking about? 7 to 9 hours a day. I feel a bit of like a hypocrite standing here and talking to you because I was so massively jet lagged last night that I barely got about 20 minutes. But I made sure I did the other 3, so I'm high functioning on stage. Now, you might look at this and wonder, what is the relevance to entrepreneurship? Why does it work? How does it work? Who has the time? All these questions are running through your mind. So let me explain why I think this is one of the most important things you can do as an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, if I ask you the question, what is your most important asset or resource you work with, you're likely to tell me your idea that you patented or the financial investment somebody has made, your team, your partnerships. All of that is well, true, and good. But as the business leader, as the CEO, as the entrepreneur, I would say the most important asset we bring to the table is right here, this inner technology. Your body, your mind, your brain, your consciousness. Why is that? What is the logical basis by which I'm making that claim? So stay with me as I make this logical argument. The first is all of your life experience as a human being and as an entrepreneur has to be filtered by this technology. So the food you ate just now is being digested by this inner technology. If somebody presents a great idea or a plan, if somebody comes up with a problem and you're trying to solve it, all of that has to be filtered by this resource. You have to listen to what that person's saying, generate empathy, understand the idea, analyze the data, whatever it is. There is no life experience for you as an entrepreneur outside of this resource. Is that making sense? 100%. This is the filter through which we will go through life. Second, all of your self-expression also has to come from this technology. So whether you're choreographing a Bollywood dance, writing an amazing business plan, designing a piece of software, all of that has to come from this resource. So logically, you arrive at the conclusion that there is no life experience we have as a human being, as an entrepreneur, outside of this resource. There is no self-expression we have outside of this resource. And therefore, the logical next step you realize is that if you learn how to put this inner technology that you have, your most important asset, into a state of peak performance, you experience life at a peak state, and you express your life in a peak state. And this is where this formula makes so much sense, because it allows you to put your inner technology, your most important asset, into a state of peak performance. Now, at this point, you're sitting there and wondering, all of that is good, but why does this work? And how do we know it works? Well, the reason why it works is not accidental. This formula did not drop down on us 2 years ago. This is what human beings have been doing for thousands of years. Long before there was a modern economy, humans who have gone before us, the 100 billion people who have inhabited the earth, some of them paused to ask these questions. And over a period of time, they've developed these rules of what works best when it comes to your mind, when it comes to your brain, when it comes to the food you take, the impact of sleep, etc. So they've left what I call the operating manual for our life, which today as business people and entrepreneurs we can take advantage of. So this has come from all cultures, but this culture in particular has a higher degree of sophistication, I would argue, when it comes to an understanding of these modalities. So it's right around us. Take full advantage of it, particularly in a state like Kerala. Second, the question is, how do we know it works? And this is when the last 50 years, science has caught up with ancient wisdom. Because without that scientific evidence, I guarantee half the room is not going to go touch anywhere near it, because you're not going to do it on faith. And this is where modern science has figured out. So neuroscientists are looking at the impact of what meditation does to your brain and the neuroplasticity that goes on. Scientists like Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin. Exercise kinesiologists have been studying now what does movement of the body do to your heart, to your lung capacity, and how does it change the working of the brain. Same way nutritionists have been looking at what is most nourishing, sustaining for us. And the fourth category is sleep researchers who've looked at what exactly happens during that 7 to 9 hours of sleep to your short-term memory, to the way you process problems and come up with solutions the next day. So there is enough evidence, and I'm not going to go into it right now, that tell us why this formula works. So if I were to just leave you with one piece of advice as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, it would be this. Can you adopt some element of the MEDS formula into your daily life and make it a regular habit? The second principle I want to talk about that I bring up in the book is finding a sense of meaning and purpose. This is what drives entrepreneurs. This is what leads to happiness. Because if you have a sense of meaning and purpose, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, you still are fulfilled, you're driven, you find a sense of mission, purpose, joy, and accomplishment. So you might turn around and ask me, how do you define it? How do you, in my own life, where do I find the meaning and purpose in what I do in what is a fairly demanding job? And to explain that, I have to give you a little bit of my family history. And it goes back to a small rice farming village. It's called Chittilamcheri. It's in Palghat. It's near Nemara. And these are the rice paddy fields that my family had as rice farmers over several generations. And each year when I go back, I walk through the fields thinking about my forefathers and my grandfather who cultivated this land, and my father too. And it is in this village that my grandparents lived as poor rice farmers. Okay? Couple of 100 miles from here. And this is where my parents lived as the children of two rice farming families with a very modest life. As you can expect, you know how this unfolds in villages around Kerala. And it's an emotional story for me to tell because my father, as I mentioned earlier, passed away 2 years ago, and he would have been very proud if only he knew, and I'm sure he knows, that I'm speaking on this stage. But they had a modest life. They had no electricity when they grew up, no running water, and they did not have access to a college education. And when I go back to the village, to Chittilamcheri, and look at the school where my mother studied, it looks like any of these schools you'll see around Kerala with a minimal amount of resources. But one thing has changed in that school, and it's in thousands of other schools, and this story unfolds not just in Kerala or all over India, but I've seen it in Ghana, I've seen it in Peru, and I've seen it in Indonesia, and that is kids with access to the kind of technologies we are talking about at this conference now have access to the same amount of information as somebody who goes to an IIT, as somebody who goes to Harvard University. So you could be a student in Chittilamcheri and look up that National Geographic video, or you can watch a TED Talk. And it's not just in English, but it's auto-translated into a language you may understand. In an era where information is like oxygen, we are leveling the playing field for humanity. This is my sense of mission and purpose. Now, at this point, you can say, this is all well and good, Gopi, but you are in a privileged position with the job you have. Not everyone in the world has this opportunity. How do they come up with meaning and purpose if they are in a very difficult circumstance? And that's a good question. And this is where I've been impressed with the people I've met around the world of how they can turn the circumstances in the head. And I want to talk about this woman, Sunita Danwar. I met her in Kathmandu 2 years ago. I went to work there on a sex trafficking project with a bunch of Google colleagues to see if we could use technology at scale to solve the problem of sex trafficking. Sunita, at that time, she was 31, is the CEO, founder of an organization called Shakti Samuva, which rehabilitates women who've gone through this very terrible situation of being trafficked away. And then Sunita told her own story. At 13, she was taken away from a village in Nepal, smuggled across the border, and put into the sex trade in Mumbai. And it's a horrific life, as she described it, as I heard the stories of Sunita as well as the other women that I met in Kathmandu who had come out of it. No human being should be subject to this. Imagine 13 years old and having to deal with 10, 12, 15 clients a day. It's horrific. But eventually she was rescued by the Mumbai police, and they, all along with the other girls who were in that situation, were taken back to Kathmandu. Except over there, the families would not accept them. There is stigma attached to it. There is other economic situation whereby the families would not take them back in. So here are these group of 15 girls, all in the age group of 14, 15, 16, sitting on a floor in a halfway house, having just come out of a terrible situation and still feeling that life is hopeless for them. And that's when Sunita reassured these girls. She was 15 at the time, 15. She said, if there's nobody to help us, we will help ourselves. And she formed an organization, Shakti Samuha, which literally means the organization power of the feminine energy of Shakti. And when I met her, she was now the CEO of this very large organization. She was 31. She's married. She's got 2 kids. And she runs the shelter where 350 girls are housed in 2 locations, rescued from this situation. All the women who run it are people who were formerly in the trade and were rescued. Why? Because she wants them to be an inspiration to these girls, have a sense of hope that if these aunties, if these ladies could rebuild their life, so can you. And not only is she running this 350 shelter home, but she'd just come back from New York having spoken at the UN. And when I asked her, her sense of mission and purpose is driven by one thing. She said, I'm going to use every ounce of my energy to make sure that what happened to me does not happen to another young woman. So as you can see, even in terrible circumstances like that, people like Sunita Dhanwara found a meaning and purpose as an entrepreneur, as the CEO of this cost-based organization. The third and final point I want to make as part of moving towards happiness as an entrepreneur is the title of my book says The Happy Human. And I want to emphasize on the human part of the happy. Because as entrepreneurs, we might get caught up in making money and getting fame, but ultimately you want to ask, as a human, how am I embracing my own humanity and the humanity of others around me, including the people I'm going to serve through my product or service? How does it bring meaning? How does it benefit their life? And this is where I found very powerful examples of how people define it. And I want to share the story of this woman, who also I met in Kathmandu, except her circumstances were completely different. Her name is Nicole Thakur Vikri, and a friend of mine, Amandine, who was a UN human rights lawyer and worked in Nepal for a while, told me about her. So on this trip, I went and met Nicole. So Nicole comes from an affluent, well-to-do family in Switzerland. And she had an education. At 21, she graduated from a civil engineering course in Switzerland and arrived in Kathmandu as a backpacker, intending to climb some smaller peaks and walk up to the base camp and return back, resume her life. On day 1, she found the street children of Kathmandu. She completely fell in love with them. On the first day in her trekking trip, she adopted 4 of them. That night, she called her mom and said, Mom, can you send me 600 francs? Mom said, Nicole, what's going on? You just left. Did you lose your money? She said, no, Mom, I want to rent a house in Kathmandu. I'm adopting 4 kids. This was, Nicole is now 43, so 22 years ago. She's never left Kathmandu since then. And when I met her, she was running a large campus. There were 350 kids that were housed there, most of them without a family, that she's giving a boarding school-like education. She's become the mother of these 350 kids. She has 2 of her own biological children, which are there in the photo. And her house is right in the middle of this campus with open windows. And the mother who funded this initial 600 francs happened to be there when I visited them. And this is their family. And I asked her what drives her, the human element of what she's chosen to do as an entrepreneur, as an educational entrepreneur. And she said, in this part of the world, I know education is what gives you social mobility, but it's not accessible to everyone. And I want to change the system. I want to change the system so that everyone has equal access to education. And that's how she has found her way, how she's defined the human element of her sense of purpose as an entrepreneur, and which is what I would ask all of you to do. More than saying, I want to be famous and make a lot of money, what is the human element of what you choose to do with your life as a professional, as a business person? I want to close off with one final thought, since I'm just outside time. And my closing philosophy comes from this festival I go to every year. It's called Burning Man. You're waving. Were you there this year? Okay, yeah, I go every year. This is my 15th year. So the gentleman who waved would know. It's a counterculture festival that takes place in the Nevada desert, where 75,000 people arrive. It's sort of like a mini Kumbh Mela. Build an entire city. This place is inhospitable. There's no water there. No life can survive in the dried up lake bed. So in this festival, 70,000 people come, build a fully functioning city, and then leave without any trace. And during that 1 week, they practice radical self-reliance, radical self-expression, radical art, radical community, and most importantly, there is no money in that city. You cannot buy or sell anything. Everything you need is sort of provided by each other. The community provides for everyone, and you trust that. It's an experiment. And the operating philosophy of Burning Man is what I want to leave you with, is that all of life is one giant experiment. Experiments, by definition, lead to unexpected results. And just like we did at Bollywood, we will never find out till we try. We will never find out till we try. So as community leaders, business leaders, as entrepreneurs, the closing thought I want to leave you with is, whether it comes to happiness, whether it comes to your business, whether it comes to the impact you're trying to have, I want you to leave the conference thinking, remembering that your life is one giant experiment. And therefore, you're signing up for this subsequent statement, that is, experiments will lead to unexpected results on the path to happiness, on the path to commercial success. But we will never find out till we try. And therefore, I wish you all the best in your continued journey in this one lifelong experiment towards becoming the happy human. May you all become the happy human. Namaste.